All right. Welcome, everybody, to the ninth Market Makers Mastermind call. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Chad Corbett. I'll be your presenter today. John's going to kick back and relax for a change. What we wanted to go through, this came from a conversation John and I were having personally a couple of weeks ago. This is actually we're going to go through a workbook that's part of a course that I gave away in my previous community, the Estate Professionals Mastermind community. It was a premium subscription-based community mainly for real estate investors and agents that specialized in probate. But what I learned as a coach, if you don't know my story, I started my career in real estate in 2005. Came up in ski front, beachfront, went to the top of that, burned it all to the ground, lived in the woods for a year, and really reinvented myself. And I designed my entire next career, the next chapter I designed after the lifestyle I wanted to live, and I made the businesses fit that. And I found as a coach, coaching thousands of real estate investors, agents, brokers, attorneys, that many of us find ourselves in the same golden cages that I put myself in. So you work your butt off to get the things, and the things own you. Things are sometimes tangibles, things are sometimes obligations, social, whatever. And there's no one right way for everybody. But I found that I felt compelled to show my path into my real estate career, from a job to a business to an active investor to a passive investor. So what we're going to do today is run through this workbook. It's a 3-hour course that we'll give you for free at the end. So on the last slide, or if you're watching this recorded, you can find it in the show notes. But we're actually going to give you this course. It still lives in the Probate Mastery ecosystem. That's one of the companies that I sold almost 2 years ago, and sold it to a dear friend of mine, Bruce Hill. And he has many courses. This is multiple courses, but this is one of them. He was generous enough to offer it to this community for free. So, by the way, we moved the media release to make it easier for everybody to get in. It all starts with this. This is the simplest path to what I'm trying to teach. And let's see. I may have to go out of presentation mode to zoom in on this. So this was the path that I took through real estate. And if you're not familiar with the acronym FIRE, it's usually used in thrifty communities of financial independence, retire early. This is my real estate specific slant on that. So my path was create a good job. Then I realized I didn't have a business, I had a job. So I had to turn that job into a business. Then I realized I had a business with a high gross, but a low net. So then I had to learn what expenses can I cut? And I mean, to the bone, save every penny so you can maximize profits. And you move up a step. Once you maximize profits, then you realize one of your largest expenses in life is actually taxation. So now, how do I strategically invest in the business and strategically invest outside of the business personally to minimize taxation? And I was able to keep my effective rate ethically, not breaking any laws. I've kept my effective rate below 20% since I made this decision. Last year, it was 8%. The year before that, it was 12.6. So from there, I cut my largest life expense, taxation, and business expense. And then I became an active investor. So I started buying houses, selling houses, flipping houses. If you've done that, you realize how much work that is. So I set a goal to be a millionaire by 30. So I could have the acclaimed accredited investor status in the eyes of the SEC. If you're not familiar with what that means, there's several rules or tests that qualify you as an accredited investor. The most common that people use are you have an annual income of over $200,000 on the last 3 tax returns, or you have $1 million net worth, excluding your primary residence, and that's an important part. Other qualifications are you have an LLC with at least $5 million. There's, I think, a total of 12 different tests, but those 2 are usually the most common. So the target I set was get $1 million on a balance sheet so I can invest in what billionaires do, alternative assets. And if you're not familiar with that world, I'll point you to a book to start out. It's called The Hands-Off Investor, and I'm blanking on the author, but somebody finally wrote a book that in layman's terms takes you from the simple concept all the way through the execution and management of private placements. So if you're interested in earning double-digit returns, it's basically pre-market investment. So if you buy a stock, that's a retail investment. This is a private investment. The stage companies go through before they go public and become a retail equity that's this side. So it's unfortunately restricted by the government only to accredited investors. So that became a huge goal of mine. And as soon as I got $1 million on a balance sheet, I quit buying houses and I started investing in passive investments. So mobile home parks, self-storage, Bitcoin mines, energy, different things that usually yield. When I was managing my own investments, like active investments, my target was an 18% annualized yield. When I moved into passive investments, that quickly moves up to 40 to 60% annualized yields. Obviously, it comes with more risk. So the Hands-Off Investor is a great place to start if you want to learn more about that. So from passive investments, that carried me into financial independence. And I hit that at 38 years old. My goal was 40. I created a bookmark on my toolbar that I've looked at for years. It says retire by 40. And when I felt compelled to check Facebook or social media or look at all the bad news in the world, instead I would open that retire by 40 folder. And I had, like, now it's called Empower. I can't remember what it was called back then, but essentially a software that will aggregate your whole life, all your bank accounts, all your brokerage accounts, everything into a real-time personal balance sheet. And when I felt compelled to look at social media, I would actually look at where I was and at that retire by 40. So at 38, I hit that. I sold one company, bought an RV, moved on to the road, and launched another company, which is the one that actually this course was launched into. And from there, my goal is to live on purpose. And that's a very carefully chosen term for me. And we'll talk more about how I got to that as we jump into this. So this is the path that I would like to, what I'd like to think is I'm influencing this path for everyone who is willing to listen to me and follow the advice I can give. I live this. It started for me at age 24 when I left the FBI. I knew nothing about real estate. And by 38, I had hit these goals. And when you have no debt and you have no real obligations, and I've traveled 24 countries, been to all 50 states multiple times, motorcycles, mountain bikes, e-bikes, lived a really amazing life while building these companies, while taking this path, not working until I was 65 years old, and then not being able to, tolerate 18,000 foot mountains or weeks on end in the Nepalese backcountry. So similar to Tim Ferriss, he's taught for years to have a series of micro retirements throughout life. For me, I decided to build companies in real estate and processes in real estate that allowed me to have many retirements within a tax year. So I, oftentimes would take 2 to 4 months a year off to play. And if you've ever read the book, or if you haven't read this book, you should. Keith Cunningham wrote a book called The Road Less Stupid. And in that book, Keith talks a lot about thinking time, which is a concept he learned from an 84-year-old billionaire when he was early in his career. And I think that's probably my biggest secret is create space for yourself to really think. And I mean clear space where you have no obligations, no distractions. Like for me, that's the woods. Like when I left Maui, I disappeared into the British Columbia and Alberta wilderness, and I lived on a motorcycle for 2 months with nothing but a paper journal and an SLR camera. And that's where I became me. That's where I kind of, as Carl Jung would put it, I experienced individuation at a younger age. That's when I really learned who I was. So when you take space, and you take time to think, make sure it's absolute space and you're not distracted. We'll skip through this. So this is, like I said, a workbook that goes along with a course. And I'm not going to belabor this line by line because that would be boring and unuseful. What I'll do is kind of run through and explain why I designed the workbook the way I did. focus on a couple of exercises that really accelerated this path for me, and then we'll just jump to Q&A. So the first thing we're going to look at is your personal lifestyle assessment. In the course, these videos will walk you through this. You'll hear some more of my stories. But what's the minimum net income you need? What is a net income that actually excites you? Like, what's your stretch goal, your big, hairy, audacious goal? And then what is it? This is one that's really hard to answer. What is enough? And I think in our society today, with hedonistic adaptation, most people end up in a golden cage because they can't define enough. Money becomes their identity, their work becomes their identity, and it eventually becomes the cage that holds them until they're 70 years old and look back and say, I shoulda, coulda, woulda. So as Tony Robbins says, don't should all over yourself. Figure out what enough is. I probably pondered this question for 4 years before I knew the answer. And for me, it's pretty simple. Like, I actually have built a spreadsheet that has everything that I think I'll purchase in my life, all of my current expenses, my estimated life expectancy based on the new actuarial actuarial robots basically on life insurance websites. So now you can actually go in and plug in your lifestyle, your age, your health, and it'll give you an assessment based on true actuarial data of how long you're estimated to live. I'm 6'7". I'm a big dude, so I'm probably only going to make it to 84, but that's better than the national average of 73. Next, how much time did you take off last year? How much time do you wish you would have taken off? What do you do on evenings and weekends? Are you working? Are you being present with friends, family, and the things that matter most in life, the ones that you didn't pay for? Who do you spend most of your time with? Who do you want to spend most of your time with? This is a gut check, guys. Like, when you go through this, and if you take this seriously, you'll be like, holy crap, I spend too much time at home on my laptop. And oftentimes the paradox is, when you're being the best human you can be for yourself, when you're authentic to who you see, that person that you see that you want to be, oftentimes money, relationships, the things that are so hard to get when you're in a forceful state, when you're trying and grabbing and fighting, they seem to just flow to you. And Dave Goggins would probably call me a pansy, because I took a different approach to get to the same end result. For me, I've found that authenticity is often more productive than hustling. And that's not going to be true for everybody. It's kind of depends on your life experiences and your mindset and potentially your spirituality. But for me, when I could create space and I could honor these personal goals first, then the professional things just always seem to fall into place. Sometimes to a level where you feel guilty. You're like, do I even deserve this? Because I did come from very humble beginnings. Next, things and experiences. We all like toys. We all like to play. Oftentimes we don't leave time for that. So what things do you want and need to improve your lifestyle? Now, a lot of people, the big house, the big boat, the big car, using debt instruments, like that thing actually owns you if you're buying it with debt. So I would encourage you to look at this. What things can improve my lifestyle by not stacking more debt on top of me, more obligations to sit and stare into a laptop, to hammer on the phones? What goal can you set to get these things? And what experiences do you need to enrich your life? Same thing. Like, if you have to put a 2-week vacation on a credit card, probably should pick a different vacation, because it's setting you further back than it's not getting you closer to that financial freedom goal. The time I was traveling, so I've paid myself a $5,000 salary my whole career. Well, that's not true. Not my whole career. When I was in profitable territory, I've paid myself a $5,000 salary. I have a beautiful home, everything I own's paid for. And it's because I adopted the discipline to find those things that enriched my life, that didn't threaten the trajectory that I had set for myself. And I've had an amazing travels. I've got over 80,000 photos, like I said, from 24 countries. You wouldn't believe what you can come up with for free or for a low cost. Next, if it matters to you, there's a section here about retirement, and that means different things to all of us. But how old will you be when you stop actively working? when you no longer are beholden to a cell phone, to a laptop, to the dings or the push notifications or the 17,000 emails that you get a week. How much do you currently have invested for retirement? How much do you need to have invested for retirement? There's a lot of calculators for this. The software platform that I mentioned earlier, Empower, it's actually ran by financial services firm. So every once in a while they'll call you and offer, a free portfolio assessment, but you don't actually have to use them as your broker to use the software tool. I found it really good for making a consolidated business and personal balance sheet automatically. It's all API driven, but also it has a great, robust retirement planner where you can run multiple scenarios. And then personal, just like who you are as a person. What's the number one thing you'd like to improve about yourself or your lifestyle in the next year? And then the big one for me, what are your core desired feelings? And if you've been in my communities, you've probably heard me talk about this, but if not, there's 2 different ways that I'm going to help you get to this in this course. This list of feelings below. So the origin story on this, I was coming back from a wedding in Ohio. I was in the phase of my real estate career where I built a small team. I was banging my head against the wall, posting great GCI numbers, top 2% on volume. But I was making like 48 grand a year net, like true net, and working my ever living ass off 7 days a week. I was averaging 6,500 minutes on a cell phone every month. I was grinding. I was hustling. And I heard a lady named Danielle Laporte, which she tends to have more of a female audience, but she's a lady that lives in British Columbia. And she was talking about her core desired feelings. And something clicked for me. I was running my businesses on Vern Harnish's Rockefeller Habits, and now the Scaling Up was the subsequent book. But I was running on a 1-page strategic plan. I had hundreds of KPIs. I knew where every phone call came and went. I knew every metric in my business. I had number metrics. I had dollar metrics. I had volume metrics, you name it. I had lots of KPIs. And that sparked some curiosity in me that afternoon. And finally, at 4:00 that morning, I had driven 6 hours thinking about it. At 4:00 that morning, I got up and went to my desk. And I made a 26-minute video that I've actually never shared with the world. But I came up with a list of about 100 words, just writing the ways I want to feel. And then I did a keep, kill, combine exercise where if they were synonymous, they would get combined in the one that had the most feeling to me. What I ended up with was 5. So to make this exercise a little easier, we developed this matrix. So what you're going to do is pick from this cloud or from the previous cloud. You can pick from these words, or you can choose your own words. This is just to get your creative wheels turning. But really think about this. Any goal you set in life, the root of that goal is a feeling. I challenge you to try to prove that wrong. Like if you want $100,000, why? And you can give this statement. Well, I want to buy a house. Why? Well, because I want to feel secure. Why? If you follow it all the way down to the root of humanity, like the human experience, there's always a feeling behind whatever motivation you have. Is usually the fuel for that motivation is to achieve a feeling, positive or negative. So what we're going to do is pick the words that have the most emotional charge to us, that in a positive way. And we're going to list those down the x-axis and across the y-axis. And in the gray in the top left, you're going to, anyway, this will help you come up with your 5 core, actually 10, and then you'll narrow that to the 5 that have the most emotional, that are most emotional to you. And really think about that. Like for me, they ended up becoming relaxed was the number 1 for me. And for most people, relaxed, they think of a coconut drink on a beach. For me, that was riding an adventure motorcycle through the backcountry of a developing country, halfway across the world, sleeping in a tent with snow leopards outside. To me, that was relaxing because I was in flow. It shut the entire outside world out because I was surviving. And that was just what made me feel the most alive. Connecting with people. I want to feel adventurous. I want to feel relaxed, adventurous, loved, significant, and embarrassingly enough, I'm forgetting the last one right now. But I've literally built my life around those 5 feelings. and my personal definition for those. This doesn't have to be a literal definition. If you look up relaxed, it looks a lot different than my life has looked. But when I feel relaxed, when I'm out of cell service, when I'm on a motorcycle that riding at a very high level off-road, you hit a flow state where you can't be thinking about anything else, or you're going to take a helicopter ride to a hospital you don't want to be in. Next, skill set. So let's get real about where we are in business. So what is your primary career right now? Brokerage, investment, or both? Hopefully both. What is your number one weakness? And this is you see here, this says in probate real estate. This was designed for an estate professionals community. It works just as well for anyone. What are the skills you're committed to learning this year? How will you hold yourself accountable? Do you want to work locally or virtually? That was a really big one for me. That's what ultimately led to me stepping out of production, because I had a really great assistant. I had really great systems in place, but inevitably somebody was always disappointed. They wanted to sit face to face with me, and they had to meet with someone else, and I had to hear them vent about it when I would get home, even though the transaction went smoothly. So eventually I realized my highest value in the industry was that of an educator. So I actually stepped out of production in 2015 to focus on that. And I was scared to death that I was going to lose credibility because I wasn't working 7 days a week in the trenches. What ended up happening is I got to work in thousands of real estate businesses around the country, and I became a way better real estate professional because I wasn't troubleshooting in one market and one team. I was troubleshooting in every market in all kinds of solopreneurship up to big teams. So what does that look like for you? And that's, now and at the end of that trajectory. Like, at what point do you step out of production? I don't think many people know the answer to that. And that kind of ties back to what the question, what's enough? So at what point will you step back and have more of a virtual presence, if ever? Some people just really enjoy the day-to-day of showing homes and negotiating offers and all that. What's your market? So define your footprint. When I first got into real estate, I would drive. My first, like right here was where I started. And because there's so few listings in rural West Virginia, I would actually cover 11 counties. Sometimes I would be out 12, 14 hours a day showing property because I had hit 3 or 4 different counties. That's not very wise. By the time I got to Roanoke, I had learned enough to narrow that down to 5 primary zip codes. So what is your sandbox? Like, where's the boundary that you refer the lead? Because it's not a good use of you. It's not dollar productive for you to go that far. Are you working a single market or multiple? What's your schedule? Do you have a set schedule? How many hours a week do you work? Do you let your customers or clients set your hours, or do you set them yourself? This is another scary point in my career that made life so much easier. I decided my second year of real estate to never work a weekend because I had an amazing woman in my life that worked Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. And we like to play camp, hike, backpack, mountain bike. And for the first year and a half, I made the business a priority. And then I realized what was most important to me in life wasn't my business. It was that woman. So I looked at that as, why would I let a client that I've known for a month be a priority over this woman that's been with me for 10 years? And I set a hard boundary, and I figured it would cut my income in half because everybody thinks real estate happens on weekends. What happened was amazing. My close ratio went up, and the number of homes I showed drastically reduced to an average of 2, because I only looked at homes after work. Most of my clients were working 9 to 5. So they didn't waste time. They didn't want to carousel me around town looking at every damn open house. We were focused and we were strategic in their search for homes. Same thing with my investor buyers. They knew, you don't reach Chad on weekends. 6 o'clock on Monday morning, my phone will be ringing. Those were the landlords. Usually your conventional buyers, they weren't the one. They were calling in the evenings after school or during lunch break. But the investors knew, you get me Monday through Friday, call anytime because I'm up early. But I actually ended up more than doubling my income by protecting my time and making the people in my life and the things I wanted to do a higher priority than the business activities. finance. So digging, then again, this is on the business side. What was your business income last year? And a lot of people in our industry, they like to brag about GCI. I could give a damn about GCI. Like, you need to understand line two. What was your net income, your EBITDA or your net operating income? What did you actually bring home? What is the usable income from the business? And boy, that was a hard lesson for me my first year. I was trying Zillow leads, Trulia leads, direct mail. I was tried it all. And at one point I had an $8,000 burn as a first year agent. And I'm like, how did this happen? One little piece of software here, a little bit of leads there. And it was just chewing through the GCI. So GCI means nothing to me because EBITDA or NOI is how you manage your business and what actually comes back to your family. So what's the median home price or the median like of either if this is getting toward a listing commission or an acquisition, an average profit per acquisition. And then how much do you have in cash reserves? Can the business survive? I recommend a minimum of 3 months. Well, most people recommend a minimum of 3 months. I like to have 6 months of operating capital in any business at any time, and retained earnings. So you can weather storms and you can pivot in instances like this, where you say, you know what, I don't want to work this hard this year. We got to change a few things. It's going to slow us down for a quarter, but we can afford to do that. It just gives you a lot more freedom in your business. If in your production, so listing and buyer agency goals, acquisition goals, this could be flips, whatever your strategy is, and referral goals. And then the people. So who, not how. Are you a solopreneur? Do you have a team? Who are the vendors that you can surround yourself with to do all the non-dollar productive work? And that's a huge part of what I teach in my estate professionals classes. Next, I'll take you through a vision exercise. This is something that a really good mentor hit me with once and I was in a downstate and I was unclear on what my path was. In short, we can shortcut a lot of psychology by sending you out 5 years into your trajectory and then writing a letter to yourself today. And I've done this with very sophisticated, very high EQ people who have come a long ways. They have successful businesses, great families, and they still feel stuck. And it's always amazing to me that this exercise can have value with a guy that figured out how to get $15 million on a balance sheet, but he can't figure out, why that something's missing. And this letter can really pull some things out of your unconscious. And the more vivid you are in this, like this is similar to, I think it was Cameron Herold that wrote Vivid Vision. I might have gotten that author wrong. They're both in Genius Network. Anyways, Vivid Vision is a great book. This is a really great shortcut to the same outcome. So we'll walk through that, and you'll actually handwrite or type your letter from you 5 years from now. This is so the momentum move is something that I just learned, slowly realized over time. The pictures at the bottom are me in Nepal. This was just a kind of a profound example of this. So at one point in 2012, I was frustrated with my business. It was 70 degrees outside on a February day, which was rare. And I went and I bought a BMW R1200 GS motorcycle because I'd looked at them. I'd wanted one. I had this vision of riding around the world. I went and bought that and it sat on the porch and I didn't ride it because I was working so damn hard in my real estate business. I took one day off or half of a day off, went and bought my dream motorcycle, and then it sat on the porch every day while I walked by it in a nice sports coat, going to appointments, coming from appointments. From there, the momentum moved to thrust me into actually riding my bike around the world and helping people. I bought a laptop case that's waterproof. I'm a photographer. And at that time I was, getting to be a better photographer. And it was something affordable that I didn't have to buy like a new motorcycle again. And I bought that laptop case thinking, what the heck am I going to so I could take a laptop with me to manage photos on travels around the world. Within a few weeks, I think it was 6 weeks, I was standing by the fire with the owner and editor of ADV Moto magazine. And he said, hey, I need someone to go to South America. And I was like, I'm your guy. and I had the camera, I had the waterproof laptop case. I had no clue where that was coming from. All expenses paid, and I got published in a magazine as a professional photojournalist for the first time. From there, that led me to Nepal, where I went on a team with MSR, Mountain Safety Research, out of Seattle, and we took adventure motorcycles into villages that have never been visited. I have photos that even National Geographic can't. It's not attainable for them. We had special government permission, and we carried clean water systems, basically little tiny desalinators, into these villages in the far reaches of Nepal. And I lived off the bike for a month and had the time of my life. So that this is like, no matter what it is, like that's a profound example of how a laptop case turned into me traveling the world and saving hundreds of thousands of children's lives from waterborne illness. But that's what was important to me at the time. And it was something as simple as a $40 Pelican case for my laptop that I believe set the wheels in motion for those opportunities to come to me. And this is, I don't know if you can read that. It says, the only impossible journey is the one you never start. That's me standing on my bike on the top of a mountain in the Himalayas. So what is that momentum move for you? Like, what do you want more than anything in your life right now? And what's one tiny step you can take today? And I will digress. This course is available to you. We can drop the link in the chat here, and it'll be in the show notes for anybody watching recorded. You can see that on the sign up page, it's actually free, that you don't even have to drop a credit card. It's a 3-hour course. And when I built this course, and what you'll hear me say in it is, I believe this is the most important course I'll ever teach in my career. You can have it for free, because the only currency I want from this is to know that you got the end result. And that's really what's driven me through the last 10, 12 years of my career, was helping as many people as I possibly can live the life that the biggest life they can imagine. So enjoy this, share this. It's not anything you have to keep secret. If you really like it, come back to our group. If you're not in our Facebook group, it's Market Makers Weekly Real Estate Mastermind. Post in here, start a conversation, share it with everybody in your brokerage. It's the gift to the world. So we can jump to Q&A now. And if I get back to my screen, we'll go to video. So if you'd like to ask a question, have a hand up, or just step in.
I got a question. What would you say, interestingly, we're in an environment, unfortunately, that validates us based on external measures like GCI, volume, transactions, number, transaction size. And I find that when the emphasis goes from managing that scoreboard, as Peter Drucker says, what you measure improves, right? You talk about KPIs in your business. Were there any KPIs related to ROI on time? Or was it just about how fast, how quickly? Yeah, or was it more about how quickly can you automate the net income?
So what I talk about in the course, and I didn't talk about on my quick rant there, I did not completely get away from KPIs. They quit being the foundation of my goal setting. So it's basically, what are my core desired feelings? What do I want to, what emotions do I want to achieve as a man? Next, how do I get there? So that's where KPIs would fall in. So I want to feel significant. In order to do that, or I want to feel, relaxed. In order to do that, I need a house that's paid for, a truck that's paid for, my bills paid for, and passive income. Well, in order to do that, I have to start with $100,000, $150,000 a year. Well, in order to do that, I'm in brokerage, so I need X number of transactions at a median price of Y. So the KPIs were still there. They just fall lower. If you can imagine this as an outline, this is the feeling. And now let's get granular. How do we get to it? So it's not that the KPIs aren't absent from your life. They're absent from your high level thinking and your high level goal setting. So I knew how many hours it took me. It took me an average of 28 hours to work a buyer end to end, and that was with 2 showings. It took me an average of 7 hours to close a seller end to end, and that was, they saw me once, and I did not go back to the house for any reason. I was able to take a listing appointment down into a 1 hour. That included lockbox photography and everything, all the vendor plan and everything. I'd never go back to a seller's house. Very, very rarely would I. And it was usually to get something that they had given me when I was at the appointment. Like they've given me leather sofas and things like that. But that was a goal that I set. That was time based because I only want to see this house one time, because for me, that's all I need. I know how to set the strategy and lead the client. As soon as I see the house, why do I need to see it again? Like, I have vendors and team members that can do everything else. So I want to feel relaxed. I need to have all these assets paid for. In order to do that, I need to make this much money. In order to make that much money, I need to have this many closings. To get those closings, I have to have this many appointments. To have that many appointments, I have to have this time allocation. And to have that time allocation Monday through Friday, I have to be concise in each appointment and on each phone call. So I was still that granular. It didn't leave my life, but it left the top level of thinking.
That's cool. I don't know that many people even know what their numbers are. Or I think it's what you had asked, what is that net income that you need to pursue? I don't know that people have given much thought to that, or much thought in general about designing their life.
I'll step out a little bit. I guess I'll say we can go through my sheet and actually look at I can give you a template to do planning like I do today. Like at the end of this path, like I've tried everything. It's been a squiggly line. This is a way that I can teach it where it seems like, oh, he was on this linear path. It wasn't. Don't fool yourselves. Like I fell on my face. I failed. I lied to myself. I put systems in place that I then broke and sabotaged. And like, there's always the messy middle. It's never going to look just like that straight linear path. But I've settled into a pretty good system now that I've stayed with for years. And like I said, I basically sat down and said, what will I consume in my lifetime? Build in a contingency fund, put that in a spreadsheet, divide by the number of years you're alive, and there's your annual income, your net income number. And that sheet even accounts for taxes, investment strategies, and everything else. So maybe in a future episode, we can actually unpack that and see what it looks like line by line.
Yeah, that'd be good. Anybody have any other questions for Chad? All right, Chad, did you give out the link so that everybody can sign up for the free course?
I have not yet.
By the way, guys, there was a multi-billionaire. He was the number 3 richest guy in South Africa, and we were listening to him in a seminar. He lost everything at the age of, I want to say he was in his mid-50s. He lost everything, negative net worth. And shortly after, he became the number 3 or 4 wealthiest guy in the country. And he said the biggest change that he made was he put up this one slide because he was playing a slideshow. It is the only thing I remember from this seminar. And it said, think more, do less. To piggyback on what Chad said. And we're just so busy driving the train that we never step back to actually think about our lives and our businesses. And so if you want to carve out time to actually go through the course, I'm going through it right now. If you want to carve out time to go through this course, I just can't emphasize enough the importance of just stopping and not operating out of fear and anxiety that makes us do more and think less. So it's actually just a fear-driven approach to life.
Keith Cunningham had the same exact story. So he built $150 million net worth. 2008 rolled around, blindsided him, and he had a negative $50 million net worth. And I've actually sat with Keith, and he told me this story directly. Super interesting dude. He's actually the guy that ultimately designed the business mastery for Tony Robbins. But that book, The Road Less Stupid, was actually written after his humbling event of going broke. And I'm dropping the links to the free course access and the books I've recommended in the notes. And if you're watching this recorded, it will be in the chat. And if you're watching the recording, it'll be in the show notes. But highly recommend both of these books. the hands-off investor if you want to be a passive investor. So the links for all three of the resources I promised are in the chat. Be sure and grab those before you leave. And if you're watching this recorded, be sure to grab them below.
And we'll text out the link to the free course, by the way, afterwards. Once we post the recording, give you guys a heads up the recording's live, okay? Because the link to join the free course is going to be on the same page as the recorded video that we just did. So with that, guys. Oh, Fed wants to know the book names.
He's already got it.
No, yeah, he put it. I just said I was about to ask him, and then he read my mind. It's
Okay,
crazy
cool.
because I'm literally doing this morning. I started something about vision and goals, and now you guys are talking about this. So,
oh, the book that I forgot to drop, I did mention Vivid Vision was the other. I'll drop the link to that right now.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
It is Cameron Harold. I thought I gave the right guy credit. So Cameron's the only other guy in Genius Network that's like me. He sold everything he owns. He and his wife are traveling the world in 2 suitcases while he runs a CMO coaching or a COO coaching company called the COO Alliance. And last time I saw him, he was like, "Oh, it's us. Like everyone in the room to us looks like they're in golden cages." And he, like the author of that book, designed his life very deliberately and continues to pour a ton of value into the world. So if you haven't read Vivid Vision, that's a longer exercise of some of the things I cover in the course.
Awesome. All right, guys, good seeing you. We'll see you next week, same time, 1 p.m. Eastern. Feel free to share with your friends. Yeah, let your friends know, mmmweekly.com. We'll talk to you soon.